Catholic social teaching is the body of doctrine developed by the Catholic Church on matters of social justice, involving issues of poverty and wealth, economics, social organization and the role of the state. Its foundations are widely considered to have been laid by Pope Leo XIII's 1891 encyclical letter Rerum novarum, which advocated economic distributism and condemned both capitalism and socialism, although its roots can be traced to the writings of Catholic thinkers such as St.Thomas Aquinas and St.Augustine of Hippo, and is also derived from concepts present in the Bible and the cultures of the ancient Near East. According to Pope Benedict XVI, its purpose is simply to help purify reason and to contribute, here and now, to the acknowledgement and attainment of what is just. Has to play her part through rational argument, and she has to reawaken the spiritual energy without which justice cannot prevail and prosper. According to Pope John Paul II, its foundation rests on the threefold cornerstones of human dignity, solidarity and subsidiarity. These concerns echo elements of Jewish law and the prophetic books of the Old Testament, and recall the teachings of Jesus Christ recorded in the New Testament, such as his declaration that, "Whatever you have done for one of these least brothers of mine, you have done for me." Catholic social teaching is distinctive in its consistent critiques of modern social and political ideologies both of the left and of the right. Liberalism, communism, feminism, atheism, socialism, fascism, capitalism, and Nazism have all been condemned, at least in the pure forms, by several popes since the late 19th century. Catholic social doctrine has always tried to find an equilibrium between concern for the whole society, especially for the weakest and poorest, and respect for human liberty, including the right to private property. History. The principles of Catholic social teaching, though rooted in the Old Testament custom of the Jubilee, first began to be combined together into a system in the late 19th century. Since then, successive popes have added to and developed the Church's body of social teaching, principally through the medium of encyclical letters. Rerum novarum. The publication of Leo XIII's encyclical Rerum novarum in 1891 marked the beginning of the development of a recognizable body of social teaching in the Catholic Church. It dealt with persons, systems and structures, the three coordinates of the modern promotion of justice and peace, now established as integral to the Church's mission. In the years which followed there have been numerous encyclicals and messages on social issues. Various forms of Catholic action developed in different parts of the world, and social ethics taught in schools and seminaries. To mark the 40th anniversary of Rerum novarum, Pope Pius XI issued Quadragesimo Anno, which expanded on some of its themes. Pope John XXIII. Further development came in the post-World War II period when attention turned to the problems of social and economic development and international relations. On May 15, 1961, Pope John XXIII released Mater et Magistra, subtitled Christianity and Social Progress. This encyclical expanded the Church's social doctrine to cover the relations between rich and poor nations, examining the obligation of rich countries to assist poor countries while respecting the particular cultures. It includes an examination of the threat of global economic imbalances to world peace. On April 11, 1963, Pope John expanded further on this in Pacem in Terris, the first encyclical addressed to both Catholics and non-Catholics. In it, the Pope linked the establishment of world peace to the laying of a foundation consisting of proper rights and responsibilities between individuals, social groups, and states from the local to the international level. He exhorted Catholics to understand and apply the social teachings. Once again we exhort our people to take an active part in public life, and to contribute towards the attainment of the common good of the entire human family as well as to that of their own country. They should endeavor, therefore, in the light of the faith and with the strength of love, to ensure that the various institutions, whether economic, social, cultural or political in purpose, should be such as not to create obstacles, but rather to facilitate or render less arduous people's perfectioning of themselves both in the natural order as well as in the supernatural. This document, issued at the height of the Cold War, also included a denunciation of the nuclear arms race and a call for strengthening the United Nations. Second Vatican Council. The primary document from the Second Vatican Council concerning social teachings is Gaudium et Spes, the pastoral constitution on the Church and the modern world, which is considered one of the chief accomplishments of the Council. Unlike earlier documents, this is an expression of all the bishops, and covers a wide range of issues of the relationship of social concerns and Christian action. At its core, the document asserts the fundamental dignity of each human being, and declares the Church's solidarity with both those who suffer, and those who would comfort the suffering, the joys and the hopes, the griefs and the anxieties of the people of this age, especially those who are poor or in any way afflicted. These are the joys and hopes, the griefs and anxieties of the followers of Christ. Other conciliar documents such as Dignitatis Humanae, drafted largely by John Courtney Murray, an American Jesuit, have important applications to the social teachings of the Church on freedom today. Pope Paul VI, like his predecessor, Pope Paul VI gave attention to the disparities in wealth and development between the industrialized West and the Third World in his 1967 encyclical, Populorum Progressio. It asserts that free international trade alone is not adequate to correct these disparities and supports the role of international organizations in addressing this need. Paul called on rich nations to meet the moral obligation to poor nations, pointing out that the relationship between development and peace. The intention of the Church is not to take sides but to be an advocate for basic human dignity. There can be no progress towards the complete development of individuals without the simultaneous development of all humanity in the spirit of solidarity experienced in human affairs. The Church seeks but a solitary goal, to carry forward the work of Christ himself under the lead of the befriending Spirit. But, since the Church lives in history, she ought to scrutinize the signs of the times and interpret them in the light of the Gospel, sharing the noblest aspirations of men and women and suffering when she sees them not satisfied. She wishes to help them attain the full flowing, and that is why she offers all people what she possesses as her characteristic attribute, a global vision of man and of the human race. The May 1971 Apostolic Letter Octogesima Adveniens addressed the challenge of urbanization and urban poverty and stressed the personal responsibility of Christians to respond to injustice. For the 10th anniversary of the Second Vatican Council, Paul issued Evangelii Nuntiati. In it he asserts that combating injustice is an essential part of evangelizing modern peoples. Pope John Paul II. John Paul II continued his predecessor's work of developing the body of Catholic social doctrine. Of particular importance were his 1981 encyclical Laborum Exercens and Centesimus Annus in 1991. On one hand, there is a growing moral sensitivity, alert to the value of every individual as a human being without any distinction of race, nationality, religion, political opinion, or social class. On the other hand, these proclamations are contradicted in practice. How can these solemn affirmations be reconciled with the widespread attacks on human life and the refusal to accept those who are weak, needy, elderly, or just conceived? These attacks go directly against respect for life. They threaten the very meaning of democratic coexistence, and our cities risk becoming societies of people who are rejected, marginalized, uprooted, and oppressed, instead of communities of people living together. While not endorsing any particular political agenda, the Church holds that this teaching applies in the public realm, not only the private. Rerum qualifies the teaching of private ownership in relation to the common use of goods that all men, as children of God, are entitled to. The Church has always understood this right within the broader context of the right common to all to use the goods of the whole creation. The right to private property is subordinated to the right to common use, to the fact that goods are meant for everyone. Many of these concepts are again stressed in St.Thomas Annus, issued on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of Rerum novarum, which encompasses a critique of both socialism and unfettered capitalism. Another major milestone under Pope John Paul II's papacy occurred in 2005, with the publication of the Compendium of the Social Doctrine of the Church, a work entrusted to the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. Pope Benedict XVI. Pope Benedict XVI's 2009 encyclical Caritas in Veritate added many additional perspectives to the social teaching tradition, including in particular relationships with the concepts of charity and truth, and introduced the idea of the need for a strong world political authority to deal with humanity's most pressing challenges and problems. This idea has proven to be controversial and difficult to accept, particularly by right of St.U.S. Catholic thinkers who are generally suspicious, or even disdainful, of supranational and international organizations, such as the United Nations. The concept was further developed in a 2011 note issued by the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace entitled "Towards Reforming the International Financial and Monetary Systems in the Context of World Political Authority." In Caritas in Veritate, Benedict also lifted up Paul VI's social encyclical Populorum Progressio, setting it as a new point of reference for Catholic social thought in the 21st century. Noted scholar Thomas D. Williams wrote that by honoring Populorum Progressio with the title of the Rerum novarum of the present age, Benedict meant to elevate Populorum Progressio, conferring on it a paradigmatic status not dissimilar to that enjoyed by Rerum novarum throughout the 20th century. Quote, Williams claims that the reason for this elevation is that Populorum Progressio, for all its real deficiencies, effected an important conceptual shift in Catholic social thinking, by moving from the worker question to the broader and richer social benchmark of integral human development. Pope Francis, in his apostolic exhortation Evangelii Gaudium, explicitly affirmed the right of states to intervene in the economy to promote the common good. Quote, he wrote, while the earnings of a minority are growing exponentially, so too is the gap separating the majority from the prosperity enjoyed by those happy few. This imbalance is the result of ideologies which defend the absolute autonomy of the marketplace and financial speculation. Consequently, they reject the right of states, charged with vigilance for the common good, to exercise any form of control. A new tyranny is thus born, invisible and often virtual, which unilaterally and relentlessly imposes its own laws and rules. Pope Francis has warned about the idolatry of money and wrote, people continue to defend trickle-down theories which assume that economic growth, encouraged by a free market, will inevitably succeed in bringing about greater justice and inclusiveness in the world. This opinion, which has never been confirmed by the facts, expresses a crude and naive trust in the goodness of those wielding economic power and in the sacralized workings of the prevailing economic system. In his second encyclical, Laudato Si', the Pope lays forth a biting critique of consumerism and irresponsible development with a plea for swift and unified global action to combat environmental degradation and climate change. With respect to climate change, some critics have argued that Pope Francis is departing from the positions of his predecessors. Daniel Schwitt observed that some writers seem to suggest that Pope Francis's Laudato Si' represents some new venture on the part of the Church, a departure from its customary range of subject matter. But, Schwitt argues, his attitude toward climate change is a precise continuation of the attitude of his immediate predecessor. Pope Benedict XVI had written, "The order of creation demands that a priority be given to those human activities that do not cause irreversible damage to nature, but which instead are woven into the social, cultural, and religious fabric of the different communities." In this way, a sober balance is achieved between consumption and the sustainability of resources. Principles. Every commentator has their own list of key principles and documents, and there is no official canon of principles or documents. Human dignity. The principle of Catholic social teaching is the correct view of the human person. Being in the image of God, the human individual possesses the dignity of a person, who is not just something, but someone. He is capable of self-knowledge, of self-possession, and of freely giving himself and entering into communion with other persons, and he is called by grace to a covenant with his Creator, to offer him a response of faith and love that no other creature can give. Solidarity and the common good. Solidarity is a firm and persevering determination to commit oneself to the common good, not merely vague compassion or shallow distress at the misfortunes of others. Solidarity, which flows from faith, is fundamental to the Christian view of social and political organization. Each person is connected to and dependent on all humanity, collectively and individually. Charity in Caritas in Veritate. The Catholic Church declared that charity is at the heart of the Church. Every responsibility and every commitment spelt out by that doctrine is derived from charity, which, according to the teaching of Jesus, is the synthesis of the entire law. It gives real substance to the personal relationship with God and with neighbor. It is the principle not only of micro-relationships but with friends, family members, or within small groups. The Church has chosen the concept of charity in truth to avoid a degeneration into a sentimentality in which love becomes empty. In a culture without truth, there is a fatal risk of losing love. It falls prey to contingent subjective emotions and opinions. The word love is abused and distorted, to the point where it comes to mean the opposite. Truth frees charity from the constraints of an emotionalism that deprives it of relational and social content, and of a fideism that deprives it of human and universal breathing space. In the truth, charity reflects the personal yet public dimension of faith in God and the Bible. Subsidiarity. The origins of subsidiarity as a concept of Catholic social thought lie with Wilhelm Emanuel von Hautala, who served as Bishop of Mainz in the mid to late 19th century. It most well known, however, from its subsequent incorporation into Pope Pius XI's encyclical Quadragesimo Anno. This encyclical's formulation of subsidiarity is the touchstone from which further interpretations tend to depart. just as it is gravely wrong to take from individuals what they can accomplish by their own initiative and industry and give it to the community, so also it is an injustice and at the same time a grave evil and disturbance of right order to assign to a greater and higher association what lesser and subordinate organizations can do. For every social activity ought of its very nature to furnish help to the members of the body social, and never destroy and absorb them, as with many social encyclicals in the modern period. This one occurs in the historical context of the intensifying struggle between communist and capitalist ideologies, exactly 40 years, hence the title, after the Vatican's first public stance on the issue in Rerum novarum, promulgated in 1931. Quadragesimo anno is a response to German National Socialism and Soviet Communism, on the one hand, and to Western European and American capitalist individualism on the other. It broke the surface of Catholic social teaching in this context, and it is helpful to keep this in mind. Gregory Babat suggests that subsidiarity draws upon a far older concept as well, the Roman military term subsidium. He writes that the role of the subsidium is to lend help and support in case of need. Employing Babat's etymology, subsidiarity indicates that the higher social unit ought to sit behind the lower ones to lend help and support in case of need. Another etymological interpretation states that subsidiarity literally means to seat a service down as close to the need for that service as is feasible. Either interpretation indicates a hermeneutic of subsidiarity in which the higher social body's rights and responsibilities for action are predicated upon their assistance to and empowerment of the lower. Francis McHugh states that in addition to the vertical dimension of subsidiarity, there is also a horizontal dimension which calls for a diversity of semi-autonomous social, economic, and cultural spheres. Quote, Quadragesimo anno presents these spheres as occupying the space between the poles of individual and state. Things have come to such a pass through the evil of what we have termed individualism that, following upon the overthrow and near extinction of that rich social life which was once highly developed through associations of various kinds, there remain virtually only individuals and the state. This is to the great harm of the state itself, for, with the structure of social governance lost, and with the taking over of all the burdens which the wrecked associations once bore, the state has been overwhelmed and crushed by almost infinite tasks and duties. These associations or lesser societies are encouraged because they are the vehicle by which society functions most effectively and corresponds most closely with human dignity. Examples of these associations today would include the family, unions, non-profit organizations, religious congregations, and corporations of all sizes. Subsidiarity charts a course between the Scylla of individualism and Charybdis of collectivism by locating the responsibilities and privileges of social life in the smallest unit of organization at which they will function. Larger social bodies, be they the state or otherwise, are permitted and required to intervene only when smaller ones cannot carry out the tasks themselves. Even in this case, the intervention must be temporary and for the purpose of empowering the smaller social body to be able to carry out such functions on its own. Distributism and social justice. Distributism is a school of economic and social thought developed by Catholic thinkers G.K. Chesterton and Hilaire Belloc. It holds that social and economic structures should promote social justice, and that social justice is best served through a wide distribution of ownership. For support, distributists cite Rerum novarum, which stated, "We have seen that this great labor question cannot be solved save by assuming as a principle that private ownership must be held sacred and inviolable. The law, therefore, should favor ownership, and its policy should be to induce as many as possible of the people to become owners. This principle is then used as a basis for progressive tax rates, antitrust laws and economic cooperatives including credit unions. Rerum, novarum, quadragesimo and centesimus annus are all documents which advocate a just distribution of income and wealth. Still more recently, in Caritas in Veritate, Pope Benedict XVI emphasized the point to such an extent that the term redistribution is mentioned no less than 8 times throughout the encyclical, each time in a positive manner.